Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to help you understand what's going on with the war in Ukraine. Here are the three big stories for today. Now, we're going to start with what's going on with Russia and what's going on with Iran and Israel. So, I saw this headline, "The Best for Putin, How the Kremlin Stands to Gain from Iran's Attack." Let's look through this article. This will be a little bit longer than usual, but just bear with me. The foreign ministry voiced what it said was Moscow's extreme concern over the latest dangerous escalation in the region. Now, there's no doubt that the October 7th attack in Israel benefited Russia by taking our eyes from the West off of what's going on in Ukraine. And this is part two of the same thing. The Middle East entering uncharted territory, short of full-blown war, is the best that can happen to Putin right now, according to one analyst. For one thing, it draws attention away from the war in Ukraine at a crucial time when Kyiv is facing major challenges on the front line, which could get worse in the coming weeks and months. Russia is pounding away at the country's energy structure. The outbreak in October of Israel's war against Hamas, which is designated as a terrorist group by the United States and the European Union, had already complicated global perceptions of the war in Ukraine and confounded Western efforts to support its defense against the Russian invasion. And it really had. And if you go back into October and you look at RT and the articles that were there just after what happened in Israel, it's almost like what Ukraine? You couldn't even find articles hardly about Ukraine compared. It was like 10 to 1 for a few days there. Okay. For the Kremlin, the potential benefits to be reaped from Iran's attack on Israel are both broad and quite specific. In over 2 years since he launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, he's increasingly portrayed the war there as part of a wider confrontation in which he asserts Russia is defending itself. Russia invaded Ukraine, but in the way that Putin tells it, Russia is defending itself against an aggressive West that's trying to defy its security and get right up on its border. Russia is defending itself and the rest of the world from the West, and in particular from the United States. Against that zero-sum backdrop, Iran's attack on Israel may play into the Kremlin's propaganda, handing Russia new material it can use to press its public narratives about the war in Ukraine and its showdown with the West. There's a certain perception amongst the Axis states, that's Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China, that the West has weakened. And that's not a good sign, because one of the reasons that it's important to support Ukraine is so China doesn't think, Taiwan, I really think that this is a good model and maybe we should go after Taiwan. And that American attitudes and policies can no longer guarantee the security of its allies. And we're giving them every reason to believe that that's the case. Instability in the Middle East diverts Western attention and resources away from Ukraine and NATO's eastern flank. It generates insecurity among U.S. regional allies, and it further fuels a broader global perception that the West cannot pacify the region. Okay, specifically, the Iranian attack on Israel further clouds the future of long-delayed U.S. aid for Ukraine. And for Kyiv, it seems the timing could be hardly worse. Now, I'm going to show you what Congress is doing in just a moment on the other side of the next big story. And it is tricky to see if this is going to help or hurt it. A little bit more at the very end, they say this. It's a classic approach for Putin's Russia. Help create problems to one degree or another, and then offer to help resolve them in a way that benefits the Kremlin. Analysts of Russia and the region say Moscow does not want an all-out war between Israel and Iran. Now that's interesting to think about, but they benefit from the situation as it is now. They said this: the scenario would bring significant risks for Russia. Remember, Iran is supplying Russia and being a faithful partner as Russia's, so you don't want to lose that necessarily, but okay. So what Russia reaps from this scenario is all kinds of good if you're Moscow, because it's taking the eyes of the West away from Ukraine at a time where it's pretty critical. It seems. Okay, again, on Rumble, if you look through, you'll see all kinds of things about Israel, but very little, if anything, about Ukraine. One article out of all that are there. Okay, switching gears, big story number 2. Mary and Donald don't seem to get along, and she wrote a book about him, and it's just bad blood. If you're keeping count, Donald's stock just plummeted 15%. Judge Merchant just denied Donald's recusal request, and Donald's delays failed, and he's forced to sit in a courtroom. It's not even 11 a.m. yet. Is he tired of winning? Okay, so let's look at this. I want to chase down the stock thing and then we'll talk about other issues. Trump media stock slides again to being nearly 60% below its peak as euphoria fades. This was April 15th. That's today's article. And if we look at the stock, you look up DJT on the NASDAQ. Don't confuse that with Dow Jones, right? You don't want that. DJT, and this is just day over day. So it went from 29.58 to 26.53 just over the day. And if you look over, like since the actual sale of it, it's dropped from 66 down to 26 over the course of just a month or so, less than a month. Okay. Okay, but that's not his biggest problem. His biggest problem is that he's facing 34 felony counts on falsifying business records, okay, because of what happened with Cohen. And it's just a bad look. Like, if you look at what's happening here, the charges from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg stem from a $130,000 payment Trump's former lawyer Michael Cohen made to adult film actor Stormy Daniels at the end of 2016 election to keep her from going public with an allegation that she and Trump had an affair. So this is just a bad look all the way around. Remember, evangelicals are a huge part of the base. Now, Trump has to spin this to be, see how, look, I'm being politically persecuted. They don't want me, right? But that's a hard narrative to overcome. And yet, here we are. Trump then repaid Cohen in installments marked as legal fees in company records, where he was like using company funds in order to pay him for this personal thing, and that's what's going on. That's the root of this. Trump is charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records. He has denied the affair and pleaded not guilty to the charges, which he says are politically motivated, and he's going to have to amplify that. But it's just a bad look, and it's going to be a bad look for a long time. In the middle of the campaign season, he could spend up to, listen to this, Trump is required to be present for the trial, which will take place 4 days a week and could last 8 weeks. And if you're the other side and you want to injure Trump, you play this out as long as you possibly can. Okay, so that's what's happening with Trump. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, Senator Schumer says that congressional party leaders are ready to reach consensus on Israel and Ukraine. U.S. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said that the U.S. President Joe Biden and congressional leaders during an April 14 call reached consensus that Congress should act quickly to provide aid to both Israel and Ukraine. Schumer hopes that something will be done to help both of these nations. But Johnson told an interview on Fox on the same day that he was planning to move forward with voting for military aid to Israel after the weekend Iranian attack. Now, Republicans by very large numbers support Israel. So if you can tie these together, you can get some progress. So how about the discharge petitions? Well, if you look at this, if you go to clerk.house.gov discharge petition, you can see discharge petition number 9, and you see 195 signatures with Jared Golden, he's a Democrat from Maine, being the most recent. And discharge petition number 10, that's the Republican version of this, with only 16 signatures at this point. To the degree that they can put pressure with the discharge petition, 195, the closer they get to 218, the closer it is that put more pressure for Johnson to have to act. Now let's look at what Johnson's doing. Iran attack puts pressure on U.S. House Speaker to pass aid bill for Israel and Ukraine. And it said the same thing where he talked about he's going to stand with Israel, but again, he has pressure on the other side. If it's Israel and Ukraine, Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has threatened to oust Johnson as Speaker over issues including his support for Ukraine. So that's where he is. So it's ironic that what happened with Iran shooting missiles at Israel could be the thing to push Johnson to actually put these two together and push them forward. And he could take some cover in that by saying, look, I have to get this out. It's so important for Israel, and this had to go with it in order for it to get done. Now, we have our issues in Congress, but in Georgia, a fight broke out in the Georgian parliament. This is Georgia, the country. In the Georgia parliament during the consideration of the controversial bill on foreign agents. A fight broke out at the meeting of the Parliamentary Committee on Legal Issues. This is like a legit fist fight. Like, they're just going at it. And I'm not going to show the video, but yeah, they're fighting. And there's also a protest in the street in Georgia. Georgian media report the detention of the leader of the Libertarian Party, And there's no confirmation on this yet. Meanwhile, the number of people at the rally near the Georgian parliament against the draft law on foreign assets is only growing. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the shares. Thank you for the subscribes. When you like, you tell the algorithm that this video is important and others need to watch it. When you comment below, you help me understand things that maybe I don't understand, so I appreciate it. But thanks most of all for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.